how do you decide a value range for a client? Long way of saying, how do you price stuff, right? When people start to get serious in this, they want to know how much to charge, right? Okay, let's get into it. Okay, hello and welcome to my first sort of long form YouTube video. Everything sort of up to this point has been stuff that I've also used on Instagram, sort of repurposed in 16:9. Speaking of Instagram, I put a story out asking people to ask me any questions they wanted, and I would answer them over here. I'm going to try to do it once a month. I have traditionally not been very good at keeping up with that stuff, but we're gonna kick it off in the month of December with our first long form YouTube video. But before we get into that, because you only hear me talk in tutorials, my name is Greg. I'm a professional motorsports videographer. Professional in the sense that I do get paid to do it, but I don't always necessarily feel like professional is the right word to describe me. I have markers in the description below, which will cover sort of the topics. So the topics, I sort of section them off, sort of personal stuff, but related to photography, editing, a lot of questions on editing, a few questions on shooting, and then there's a lot of questions on sort of the business side of motorsports, sort of how to get into filming motorsports. So those are the topics I'm going to cover. I'm going to try to link timestamps below on sections of questions so that if you're interested in jumping around, you can do that. Feel free to ask questions in the comments and I will do my best to answer them. Okay, let's get into it. I got a few on how I got into shooting motorsports and sort of how do people get into shooting motorsports. And the way I would recommend the way that I did, right? I can only go off my own experiences. A lot of people have different stories. This is the one that's worked for me. So I've been in racing all my life. My brother and I used to race karts as kids, so it's been a passion of mine for forever, since I was a kid. I worked on the business side of racing for a little over a decade, learned a massive amount, and I really enjoyed doing all that stuff. But I've always been into media, graphic design, websites, video, photos. I've always been into that stuff, and COVID happens, you reassess some of the things that are important to you. My wife did the same thing. She started her own business. So finally I said, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and do this. So 2 years ago, after COVID, I left my job that I had been at for 10 years. I loved that job and decided, you know what, I'm gonna go after this. So I started to become a sort of videographer, if you will. So I spent an entire year going to various tracks in my areas, various tracks that I could drive to and shooting as a fan, different series, not just sports car stuff. Actually, very little sports car stuff. I did some IndyCar stuff. We have an IndyCar and NASCAR track here in St. Louis. I drove to Nashville and did the SRX series. I did all kinds of things where I just sort of tried to build my portfolio. Short form was on the come up, so I decided at these events, I'm going to shoot with the intent to make a product that I can sell to teams and drivers and organizations the following year. So I spent that year going, shooting, making various reels. I didn't do a ton of long form stuff. I did different types of reels. And basically at the end of that season, before Daytona, started packaging that stuff up and sending that off to potential clients. So I'm sure there are a million ways that you can get involved and started, but that's how I got started. Okay, moving on. Favorite piece of equipment or gear that you use that's not a camera? For me, it's going to be my Honda Ruckus scooter. That is the most vital piece of equipment. There's a real downgrade in the quality of my work if I'm not able to have that scooter at the racetrack. And I'm just able to cover so much more ground because I can transport myself around the track at my own will. So if I had to say another thing, it would be the On shoes, the waterproof, I don't know what they are, Cloud 5 or something, waterproof shoes. My feet used to hurt all the time. Since I got those shoes, they don't hurt anymore, and we're very often walking in grass early in the mornings and it's super wet, and obviously when it rains, it's a huge help to have waterproof shoes. So they're very hot in the summer, that's worth saying, but those and the Ruckus scooter are two pieces of gear besides the cameras that I consider essential. Your favorite car and dream project? Okay, for me, I would say hands down, probably the Valkyrie, the AMR Pro Valkyrie. Aston Martin has made a fantastic car. I've been fortunate enough to shoot it a couple times in Phoenix at some corporate event stuff with the Heart of Racing, and that thing will get your attention. I've never ridden in it. It does technically have a passenger seat, and I don't really care to ride in it, to be honest. But it is a sight to behold and something that I get really excited to point the camera at. And if I had to say my dream project, shooting that car at Le Mans in 2025. Heart of Racing has been a really good partner of mine. I very much enjoy that team, and now that they're bringing that car over to the WEC series, it is going to be really fun. Who knows what the future holds, but should I get the opportunity to do that, I would say that's going to be pretty cool. Who's your inspiration, bruh? Early days when I was first starting out, before I left my job, when I sort of spent that year going to various tracks that I could drive to and shooting, I watched an awful lot of my what are now my good friends Chris at Flying Lap Media and Wyatt Lloyd. They are the series photographers or videographers at SRO, and I watched their content nonstop. I would be on vacation just consuming massive amounts of Chris's demo reel. I love their stuff, the colors, just the way that they edited. I loved it all, and that really sort of drug me along as I was like becoming obsessed with this stuff and really learning how to do it. So, okay, moving on to editing. All right, first one, do you edit for speed or perfection? Well, hopefully both, but done is better than perfect technically. And the client work, generally speaking, the short form stuff, clients want that stuff right away. So you sort of, your speed that you have to edit is basically fixed. They need that stuff by the morning. And so you try to get it as perfect as possible until the morning. There are times I've sent an edit and I'm like, man, this is a banger. 2 weeks later, I'll see it and I'm like, well, I could have tweaked this and that. That it is what it is, but the reality is you have to deliver on time in this industry. You can't be late. So speed is the most important. Get it as perfect as possible. Best way to improve editing. Lots of questions about that. So it evolves over time, right? Things I've learned. As I was just talking about, racing is an intense, fast, and hectic sport. Definitely need to have that captured into your edits. Now that's not to say that you can't do slow-mo edits, you can't do all that kind of stuff. That all has its place, but definitely need to make fast, quick cuts. Think in terms of fast and quick. And a lot of times when people send me their stuff and they want me to give my opinion, all of the clips can be cut in half. The amount, like, you cannot have a clip that's 2 seconds long in the short form sort of universe. If you're doing long form, obviously, you know, tell the story however you need to tell it. But in the short form stuff, you've got 12 to 15 seconds. You can't have a 2-second clip. So cut your footage in half. Audio is massively important, and I cannot stand reels that do not have car audio in it. Lamborghini spends $10 million a year on some exhaust sound engineering crew to figure out how to get their cars to sound the way they do. It is disrespectful and freaking sacrilegious not to have that audio in a clip. So, and lastly, obviously you can't practice editing without footage. And so, not to plug myself, I try to stay away from that. But like I said, I went around, I traveled around for a year. I spent thousands of dollars of my own money trying to build up this portfolio, and more importantly, trying to get experience and practice. So for the first time, to try to help sort of some new filmmakers get their editing practice in before they spend all that money, or if they can't spend all that money, so that they can still practice their editing, I'm gonna download some of my footage onto drives from various events so that you guys are able to get that footage and practice for yourselves at home. So there's links down in the description. Feel free to check that out, and if you want some sample footage to keep yourself sharp or to improve your skills, feel free to give that a look. Okay, lots of questions about transitions. Obviously, short form content, like I said, it's intense, it's hectic. 3 things that I look for when I'm at the racetrack, because a lot of times you don't know. If you've never been to a track, you don't know what you don't know. So I'll look for motion, I'll look for color, and I'll look for shapes. If I'm on track and I'm panning a car through a photo hole, and there's a sign where the photo hole ends, and I pan into that white sign, I'll think in my head, instead of just feeling defeated, like I wish that sign wasn't there, think to yourself, maybe the team has like a white toolbox or a white driver's suit on the pit lane so that you can like come out of that. So you can transition the car from the car pan into a section of footage where you're in the pit box, right? So it's a bit more seamless. Motion is another great example. A lot of times they'll hold the lollipop in the pit lane and go up and down. I'll pan with that, and then later when I'm shooting a driver or a car on track, I'll pan down into that car. So I try to think of colors, think of shapes. My Ferris wheel and wheel transition that was on Instagram is what a lot of people commented about. that was just shapes. I mean, they're all circles, right? And to be honest, originally I wanted to do an eyeball as well. The Ferris wheel, I don't even remember what I did. Ferris wheel, clock, wheel, transition. Those are all just circles. So before I went to the event, I knew that Ferris wheel's always there. It's a 24-hour race, so there's clocks everywhere. A lot of it is just trying to think a little bit beyond just going out and shooting the cars on track. It's the off season, so this is more talking than I've done in a minute. Okay, moving on to shooting. Jesus, this is the most I've talked in a while. Curious to hear how you think about placement, composition for pans. If I don't already, I'll have a camera position video on the page soon. It's on my Instagram too, if you want to check that out, on how I sort of choose where the camera goes and how I attack the corners of racetracks. But the biggest thing I would say is on some of the, it's not quite like photography, right? Because you are moving, your comp kind of changes as you move the camera. On the regular speed stuff, I think a little bit less on composition and a little bit more on the action of the car, right? So maybe I'm shooting the car on the exit of a turn at Road America, and it's got some, it's got a porta potty in the background or trucks or something like that, but the action of the car and the sound of the car is really good. I don't care as much about the composition on shots like that. On shots that I know I'm gonna slow down, like cars, there's a decel into turn 7, I think, at Sebring, where they sort of cross over the bridge, which has Sebring on it. And if I know I'm gonna shoot that in slow motion, then I do care about composition when it's a little bit slower. So if I'm gonna slow it down, I do care about composition. So I'll shoot in a way that I can get the car passing in front of that bridge. And that's sort of how I handle setting up or prioritizing maybe composition over like the action of the cars. The last and sort of most talked about topic is sort of how to get into this line of work, how to get yourself into media in motorsports. So first question, and probably the most universal, is what is the most accessible path people can take to get into motorsports media? I talked in the first segment about how I got into the sport, and I would say that is the process that I would recommend. If I had to give some additional thoughts, it would be to first shoot as a fan at big events, and you have to kind of be smart, right? IndyCar, a lot of IndyCar events are packed with fans, so it's like really hard to get around. Pick series if you're trying to go big and not just your local track. Pick series that are easier to get around. So say like SRO events and GT World Challenge events here in America are very easy to get around, and a lot of the tracks, for that matter, have good fan access, some better than others. So a track like Road America, for example, has a massive amount of areas that you can shoot as a fan. So prioritize events that have easy transportation around the track on maybe, I'll say smaller, I don't mean smaller, less fan interaction at the track, so it's easy to get around, and have good access for fans to shoot. I would also say don't feel like you need to go to the biggest series. I drove to Nashville because a friend of mine lives there, and the SRX series was there. Most people don't even know what the SRX series is. It's like a Tony Stewart ran sort of oval series with sort of unique looking late model knockoff cars. One of the biggest clients that I got, even still to this day, they're still a client of mine, I got because of a video I made from the SRX series, which is nobody knows what that series is. It doesn't have to be a sports car edit to get the attention of sports car teams and PR people. So I did a little stop motion sort of driver introduction type graphic, and that caught the attention of an IMSA sports car team, and they asked me to come shoot for them in Daytona. My very first year I was at Daytona, and that's how that kind of stuff goes. So don't feel like you have to go to the biggest, baddest events to get the footage you need for your portfolio, because creativity wins every time. Something that people don't want to hear, and something I definitely didn't want to hear, is that you need to start at the bottom, not the top. So if just sending a message to Porsche Penske and saying like, hey, like I would love to work for you, is where you think you need to start, then and without any luck anyway, you're not going to get a job in this field, right? Start at the lower levels of motorsports, whether it's a spec series like Lamborghini Super Trofeo or Porsche Carrera Cup, or even lower like Michelin Pilot Challenge, or even lower than that, just SCCA and stuff at your local track. And because a lot of times those drivers in all those series are trying to go up the ladder, right? So you can follow them up the ladder, build a good relationship and network with them, go up the ladder. Don't try to start at the freaking hypercar class in IMSA, or your tenure as a professional motorsports videographer will be short-lived. I want to get photographer access at the track. How should I ask for that? Again, sort of same as before, like I would start at the lower level series. Series like IMSA and IndyCar are not gonna allow you to be there shooting unless you have a reason to shoot. Like I have to get confirmation from my clients to IMSA that I'm there to shoot for them, and I've been with the series for a while now. So you're not gonna be able to shoot at any of the big series if you don't have a reason or client or just publication that you're there to shoot with. So start at the easier series. I would say the highest level series that is easy to get credentials for is SRO. Outside of that, you've got SCCA, you've got local track days, Porsche Club of America, all Porsche Sprint Challenge, all this stuff is easy to get credentials for. So I would start there. Usually there's a press officer or media sort of contact that you would get in touch with. It's either on their website or you can reach out to somebody from their website to ask for the media person's information because you're there to shoot. But generally speaking, like you'll have to have some reason to shoot. So that's why shooting as a fan is so important first. Okay, how do you structure content packages and pitches to potential clients? Okay, so there's sort of two schools of thought when it comes to motorsports videography. There are people that are there exclusively with the team, and the team sort of covers their expenses, pays them either day rate or weekend rate, and they make content for that team, and then when they're done, they're done. The other path, and the path that I take, is the freelance path, and both are equally as valid. It's just freelance has worked better for me. So for me, I'm on the hook for all my expenses, right? So I have some financial exposure there, say if I didn't get clients, but I also get a significant portion of the upside. So the more work I take on, the more money that I make. And that particular linear relationship is important to me, and that's why I've chosen freelance. Now, when it comes to my actual sort of rates, we'll say, I think about things like products on the shelf at Walmart. I package my stuff as products, and then they can choose to buy that product, right? And I have a couple different ones. They can choose what works best for them. So a social media reel is a product. A driver introduction reel is a product. A long form, 3-minute piece about your event weekend recap is a product. Clips that you throw in your stories as a background for your, results graphics, that's a product. I list all those products out to a new client. I say, here's what I offer, just like a store would. What would you like? Because the reality is, PR teams or drivers or team managers, their focus is on winning races, right? They know that they need media, but their focus is on winning races. So don't expect them to know what their needs are or sort of what the difference between a reel and a story is. Don't expect that stuff. Give it to them easy. Let them make an easy decision, and you'll be significantly better off. So when I'm pricing stuff for clients, it's just like if you went to Walmart. A box of Wheaties is the same for you as it is for me. So I package my reel. This is how much it is. I do carry financial exposure in the event that I don't get enough to cover my expenses. But once you sort of get in this game for a bit, you realize that's small potatoes. How do you decide a value range for a client? Does your current average value in the market matter? Okay, so long way of saying, like, how do you price stuff, right? And that's probably the most sort of asked thing when people start to get serious in this. They want to know how much to charge, right? I spilled water on myself. My wife will tell you I do that all the time. So like I said, my pricing is kind of across the board, right? So I don't change my pricing a lot for like a reel from client to client. There are ones that I'm desperate to work with that get a small discount, or maybe I let them choose the music themselves that get a small discount. But for the most part, the pricing is the pricing. I don't really change it from client to client. Market value does play a factor, just like anything, right? But at the same time, if you're providing a premium product, you should charge a premium. If you're providing a less premium product, you should charge a little bit less when it comes to the range of what people charge. Some of that comes from just being honest with yourself, right? When I first started out, I wasn't charging the same as I charge now. But I've earned the respect of a lot of teams, and I've also improved and become obsessed with this stuff and tried to improve every single race that I go to. And because of that, I get to charge a little bit more for my products than I did when I first started. So market range does play a factor. The only thing I would say in terms of pricing stuff, because a lot of people ask about, there's a lot of people in these questions that are sort of at that intersection where they know what they're doing, they know how to shoot motorsports, they need that first gig, right? And the big question is, do I do it for free? Do I do it for a discount? Do I do it for exposure? All that stuff. And I don't have like it's a weirdly hot topic for a lot of people. I don't have a hill I die on this deal. The only thing I'll say is if you go to them for the first deal, if you go to them, it probably is going to be a discounted or free exposure type deal. Never should a client come to you and they get it for free. If a client is coming to you, then you should be charging. So if you're very early on, brand new days, just doing this for the first time, if a client is coming to you, you have to charge regular money. I mean, if you're not, you'll never get them to charge more, right? It's a lot easier to talk clients down on pricing than it is to talk them up. So if you think you're doing this for free this weekend, it's just unlikely. It does happen, of course, but it's unlikely that they're like, oh, let's pay this guy to do the same thing that he just did for free next week and for the weeks to come. So I would just be cautious and mindful when doing free work. What tools do you use to plan out travel, and how much do you budget? It sounds overly simplistic, but I have like a Google sheet basically where I will put sort of the hotel, gas or flight, and rental car. There's some series have licensing fees where I just sort of put all that in. I have an idea of how much money I want to make and either how many clients I need to take on if I'm doing the freelance path to make the money I want to make. How much can I do per day? Because you can only do so much per day in terms of editing. Or if I'm working for one place, it becomes this is what I need them to pay me. So in terms of budgeting for all that stuff, it's pretty easy to look up online, like around what flights would be, around what rental cars and all that stuff will be. It's harder when you go international, but for the most part, all that stuff is accessible on the internet. Licensing is only usually at the bigger series like IMSA or SRO. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple outside of that. Just put it all in an Excel sheet, see what you got, see where you're at and where you want to be. Okay, that's going to be where I stop it. If you asked a question and I didn't answer it, I appreciate you asking. I really do. It just I'm trying to keep it. This is the first one, right, that I'm doing on YouTube. So I'm trying to find my range on how long this can be before people start going to sleep. So I'll try to do this once a month. I will likely do one after Daytona. I appreciate if you've made it this far, which surely you haven't. Feel free to hit the buttons below, so that you can see more of this stuff in the future. If you have questions, feel free to ask them. I try to be pretty mindful of that. Check out my Instagram, which has I've been on a lot longer, and it has a majority of the type of work that I do. Feel free to hit the buttons below, and I'll see you in the next one.